On this episode of History Hunters, Sarah and I check out the historic leftovers of Milton, California, a town which never quite took root in the foothills of western Calaveras County. We'll check out the graves in the historic cemetery, the ruins of the old schoolhouse, and find the location of the bygone depot where Black Bart was interrogated after his last robbery. Hey, welcome back to another episode of History Hunters. We are in the community of Milton, California. If you've never heard of it, you're probably not alone, because this community dates back to 1871 and there's hardly anything here. But we're going to go and check out the historic Milton Masonic Cemetery here, with some of the graves dating back to the 1870s. Where do you think we should start?
At the horse.
The horse. So here's a J.E. Powers, died September 20th, 1895.
14 years old. Hey, there's something like maybe it's J.D. Power and Associates.
That's a commercial.
I know. That's why I was like, where have I heard that before?
L.H. Powers, native of Kentucky, died 1883. He was 38. Alexander McDonald, born in Cornwall, Canada, died in 1885. Wow, look at that.
I won't get one of them ponies to come to me.
They won't come to you? No.
Well, there's some that are pinned, and then that one's super far.
This little grave of Anna, she died in 1883, it looks like. Oh, this is kind of puzzling. Laura Mead, they didn't put the date on, but it looks like she would have died by now. That is such a cool thing on the grave. Been out there over 100 years and it hasn't worn down yet. This one here is going to take some research because it's Donners from Germany, native of Germany. I wonder if they're related to the Donner Party. H. Donner, born 1822 and died in 1892. And the E. Donner, probably Elizabeth. R.B. Donner, 1861 to 1920, native of California. Oh, there's some names on there still. Charles Abbey and Louise Abbey.
Look at all the ponies out there. In memory of my darling, what? Darling what? Darling, what is that word? Something, darling loving wife?
Yeah.
And mother of our, what? Something children, our what?
Dear children.
Dear children?
Maria, wife of Joseph Curtis, died in 1885. Look at her hands.
Well, this one died 1882. This is another Mary, beloved wife of Samson Deeble.
Cornwall, England. This was a child, just a couple of months old. Now, there were Breens on the Donner Party as well. I'm wondering if they are part of the Donner Party. The backside of the cemetery, it's this hill with all these horses and cows grazing out there. They've
been up here. Look at the poops. They're all over the place. But they're not going to come to me.
Sometimes I wonder if she would be interested in the cemetery if it were a pet cemetery. This is the one that caught my eye. 9th Ohio Cavalry. It's a Lieutenant George Tilford. It's neat how they took care of this grave like this. Put the flags on it. Leland Purcell, Private, 314th Engineers, 89th Division. I stumbled upon this very awesome grave. Look how tall it is. I understand that he patented a device in 1874, which was a derrick to move heavy sacks of grain. But judging from the size of this gravestone, he must have done quite well with his invention anyway. And right back here, Walter Roby, died in 1902. Sally Reed, wife of A.A. Reed, died August 26th, 1866. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that was way before this town of Milton was established. Here's some more that predate this community. Look at that. Died 1870. David and Clinton. They died same month. Sometimes diseases completely wiped out families.
What is this stuff?
It's called lichen. It's like a moss.
Yeah, well, it gets super duper hard. This one's still squishy, but it's all in the eye.
That gentleman died in 1913.
I found some dead baby mice.
Dead baby mice?
Dead baby mice. Richard Carlin died August 12th, 1863, at 60 years old.
You sure that's not 1883?
Well, 1883. What did I say? 63?
Uh-huh.
Oh, 1883.
Native of England. So I read online that this guy's grave, Abraham Wise, died in 1872, was the oldest grave here, but that is not the case because I just found one that dated back to 1866. And this one here is 1869. Just a reminder that things do not last, not even planks to gravestones. Well, it's not a gravestone, is it? In my video of the Carson City Cemetery, we talked about these iron graves here. Here's another one. I'm kind of made out of cast iron. 1903. This one states was a pioneer of 1849. Wow. The Reverend James L. Carndiff died in 1897. These were made to look like stone, but they are made out of cast iron because they age quite well.
Frank Brown, born December 3rd, 1857, died April 25th, 1917, native of Vermont.
So this is George Hodges' grave, 1897. I'm going to assume that this little replica of a Bible made out of stone is actually his grave. This community was established in 1871 after the Southern Pacific Railroad was completed up and down the valley. It went straight down the Central Valley of California. And because there was such an intense copper operation up here in Copperopolis, not far from here, they built a rail line. Up the mountains not far from here is the Calaveras Big Trees, which was a great tourist place. So a lot of the Bay Area people that wanted to go see the big trees up in Calaveras County would board the train in the Bay Area and in Stockton, come all the way up here to Milton where there was a terminus, and then they would get on the stage and they would ride up to the big trees. And so this was supposed to be a promising place at one time. However, the copper mines, I understand, kind of fell by the wayside in due time, so there was no economic benefit to keeping this community alive anymore. At one time there were some hotels in Milton. Now there's not even a gas station or a store. The town did have a post office in 1871, but I understand that closed in 1942. There's really no sign of the railroad, but we're going to try to go find out where the depot was. The depot has an interesting story to it. Now you may be asking yourself, how did Milton get its name? Well, that's another interesting story. So when the railroad was built here in 1871, one of the investors of the railroad was Milton Latham, and he became the 6th governor of California. Now, the interesting thing about Milton is his term as governor was very short. It was just 5 days, from January 9th to January 14th of 1860. He resigned his position so that he could become the next U.S. Senator after Senator David Broderick was shot and killed in a duel with Chief Justice Terry over in the Bay Area. And so he was just elected governor, and he decided he wanted a higher office. 5 days later, he resigned. Sorry, voters, changed my mind. Here's a grave of the Eppersons. Now, up in Tuolumne County, there's an Epperson House restaurant. I wonder if they're related. C.W. Thompson died in 1885. He was 65, native of Virginia. This is pretty much the way this landscape looked before white men even entered the valley. Other than the fact that there's horses and cows dotting the landscape and fences and an occasional house and a barn. This is a really old place. Now over in this area, I don't know if you can see it, but we're going to go over there. That was the schoolhouse. It's completely fallen down. I ran into a man who was pruning bushes at 2 grave sites that he adopted. So when did that school go out? I mean, when
did it fall?
Well, when was it used?
You know what? I don't know. I don't know what years it was used.
Because I've been watching it slowly fall through the decades.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a caretaker here?
No.
No?
No. I had adopted Katharina and William, and then...
Who are they?
They're from Switzerland. She was born in 1829, and William 1830.
Oh, my family's from Switzerland too.
Yeah, that's when, and I don't know what year they ended up here, but she died in 95, I think.
At my feet here is the grave of Elwood Shoshton. The seaman second class died in naval action on Iwo Jima on February 21st, 1945. Now, he was killed when his ship, the USS Bismarck Sea, was attacked by a Japanese kamikaze plane that crashed onto her deck, causing an ammunition store to explode and sinking the carrier in about 90 minutes. He was one of 318 men who lost their lives on the ship that day. Look at this sad little thing here. Name's completely gone. I have no idea whose grave that is. Often these family plots are boarded in concrete and bear the family name. The tall marker there is for a W.H.H. Rhodes, who died in 1931. Lucinda Blagg died in 1867. So just a short little walk away from the cemetery is the old schoolhouse. So in about 2008 I came out here, and there was obviously more of this building still standing, but since that time, it's 2020, 12 years later, more of it has fallen in. What is standing is the vestibule. In other words, when kids came in to the schoolhouse through the front door, they would put their coats and shoes and jackets and such in these little rooms and then head on out into the main building of the school. As you can still see, there's a little bit signs of the doorway and probably a little window above that door. That was the school. You can even see a little bit of the trace of the porch roof attached to the facade and some of the flashing still in place. But we're glad at least that's standing. Old door, it's still there. Back then, girls and boys would line up in separate lines, kind of kept them away from each other. Because you know boys, they tend to not keep their hands to themselves. I wonder how much more time it has before it's all fallen in. It's like nobody has the heart to actually tear it completely down. Kind of reminds me of the Little House on the Prairie days. It's kind of sad to see this history go into the ground, but you know, preservation efforts like that require a lot of money, and this is a little town. Sure, nobody here has money. There's no jobs to speak of other than the landfill, which is pretty close by. So I think we're done here at the cemetery. And at the schoolhouse, we're going to go and try to find out where the old depot was. And I'm going to tell you over there who actually got to visit that depot. So we drove over here to where the Oddfellows Hall was, and I'm quite shocked and dismayed at the fact that it's now gone. I was just here a couple years ago. It's right over here. Let's see what this says. Keystone Lodge 161, instituted in Copperopolis, 1862 at the height of the copper mining boom, and moved here in 1881 to Milton, the terminal of the Stockton and Copperopolis Railroad, which because of the collapse of copper mining, never reached its intended goal, dedicated in the memory of those who sought to perpetuate the moral teachings of Freemasonry. To them, we gratefully acknowledge our debt. And this was dedicated in 1962, 1 year after I was born. I can't believe it's gone. It's like a pillar. The building was right here. Well, that's really disappointing. It's one of the few historic buildings that were here, and now it's gone. Right over in front of me was where the depot was. Black Bart himself was brought to this terminal. One of the most notorious stagecoach robbers in California history. If you've watched my other video, then you know he robbed the stage in 1883 as he waited behind a rock at Funk Hill near Copperopolis, not too far from here. And when he was captured in San Francisco in 1883, he was brought first to the jail in Stockton and held overnight. The next day, Black Bart was escorted here to Milton by Wells Fargo agent Harry Morris. The only order of business in Milton was to bring Bart to the Wells Fargo office inside the depot, here to face the stagecoach driver he last held up. Word leaked out that Bart was coming here, and so a large crowd gathered outside. When Bart showed up at the depot, he took notice of all the people, and he grinned and he said, "Why look, the whole town's turned out to greet me." Reason McConnell, the stagecoach driver who was robbed by Black Bart on Funk Hill, said he couldn't positively identify Black Bart because he had a flour sack over his face. But as soon as the two exchanged words, McConnell recognized the voice. From there, Charles Bowles was escorted to the jail cell in San Andreas, where he was tried, convicted, and sentenced. After his robberies, there's some indications that he went through here as well on his way back to Stockton, on the way to San Francisco, because he lived in San Francisco. That was his home base, and he was committing a lot of his robberies from his home base, living a really nice lifestyle. I would love to get in this place. Sarah's pretty good at getting in places like this. Let's see if I can sneak in. Along came lifetime Milton resident Harold Hattler, who filled us in about the missing Oddfellows Hall. He also told us about the railroad tracks and the depot long since removed.
It was going to go on up, across the road eventually, go up kind of where that country at the foot, kind of where that palm tree is, that country. And that was to get slate and other stuff, transportation. And in the meantime, things changed and trucks come. So they just froze on it.
So that Oddfellows Hall burned. Do you know what year that was?
It wasn't real long ago.
I was surprised. I was looking for that big white building and it's gone.
It's a landmark. Everybody says that.
Yeah.
It's some kids horsing around.
Oh, wow. Do you like living here?
Don't know any different. Oh, when I was married, I lived other places a little bit. Yeah. I lived down the road a place or two.
So Harold was telling me that they use the slate down here. Use it for slate board. While he's talking, he let me come on the property here. But this apparently was the dock for the railroad way back. Brick wall here. The train actually went right through here. This was a freight dock, apparently. As you can see here, there's rusted history right here. So we have that picture that shows where the depot was. I was told that the railroad was right through here. I think I'm actually I would be on the rail bed right here, and over in this direction is Stockton, California. That's where the train came from. I was told that this material here was not from any of this, but I see some picket fences there. Very cool. Piece of windmill as well. Wow, look at this. Look at that. The aeromotor, Chicago. That was obviously a windmill. I would think American pickers would have a field day here, but I don't know, maybe they don't like old rusty pipes and things like this. This definitely looks like where the railroad was. So Harold was telling us that the hotel that he tore down was located right here. I did show him a map of Milton, and it indicated that the name of the hotel was the Tornado Hotel. It would have been right in here. You can see some old trees here as well. There's no getting in there?
Well, you gotta climb over it.
He pointed out a feature over here. This is a little mound. The mound was from dirt that was excavated, a little roundabout for the train. So this was the end of the line for the railroad here. So they had to back the train up a little bit, pull the engine down here on a side track, turned it around here at this location. This depression right here was made for the locomotive turntable, so they could spin the train engine around and take it back to Stockton. Way off in the distance, on the side of the hill, you can see where they cut a notch through it. That was for the railroad. Scars still visible. According to this sign, the street names are Granite, off that direction, and Plaza, off this way. They would often use that word plaza to indicate kind of where the center of the town was. Right over here is an old historic building, no longer used for storing buggies and cars, but for hay. It only stands to reason that when Black Bart was dropped off at the train depot and had to take the stage up to San Andreas for trial, this certainly could have been one of the routes that it took. What would a show be without you and... Oh, look!
He smiles.
We obviously learned as much as we can about the place that we're going to visit. So we hope that you enjoyed this episode of History Hunters, or you visit Milton, California, Calaveras County. I would appreciate it if you would please subscribe to our channel.